Wait! No water for him.
Ben-Hur, 1959, wasn't just a biblical epic. It was one of Hollywood's most chaotic, dangerous, and bizarre productions ever attempted. These are the insane behind-the-scenes secrets they hoped audiences would never uncover. Fact 1. The original chariot arena was so large that workers joked it resembled a real Roman stadium rising out of the ground. During early construction, a massive section of the stands gave way and collapsed unexpectedly, injuring multiple crew members in the process. The incident halted production immediately because engineers feared more sections might be unstable. MGM executives panicked when they realized that the rebuild would cost weeks of time and millions of dollars they didn't have. Workers described the collapse as a cloud of dust, wood, and metal crashing down like an earthquake. Some crew members refused to return because they believed the set was cursed. Engineers redesigned the foundations using reinforced steel to prevent a second disaster. The rebuild required more than 1,000 laborers working long hours under intense deadlines. Dust covered the studio lot for days as trucks hauled away debris. The collapse forced the studio to reevaluate safety protocols for the entire production. Even after the rebuild, some workers remained nervous about standing under the enormous structure. MGM hid the extent of the damage from the press to avoid negative headlines. The scheduled delays pushed the film dangerously close to missing its release window, and the collapse became the first sign that Ben-Hur would become one of Hollywood's most chaotic productions. Fact 2.
Nice, swift fella. You must not win the race the first time around. You win the last time around.
Charlton Heston had no real experience with horses before taking on the role of Judah Ben-Hur, which shocked the film's trainers. He began an intensive training program that required him to practice with 4 horses at a time until he could steer them with precision. His hands blistered from the reins so badly that he wrapped his palms in thick tape every morning. The horses responded instantly to pressure, so any mistake could cause a dangerous swerve. Heston trained daily in the blistering sun until sweat dripped from his arms onto the reins. Trainers pushed him harder each week because Wyler wanted the race to look completely real. Even basic turns became complicated maneuvers that required perfect timing. By the time filming began, Heston had gained the confidence of a seasoned charioteer. Crew members were shocked by how naturally he handled the horses once cameras rolled. His intense training helped him move fluidly during complex stunt sequences. Some stuntmen even said Heston could have competed in real chariot races. His dedication prevented the need for excessive stunt doubles, and his command of the horses became a key reason why the chariot race remains so iconic. Fact 3.
Yes, you are ready for sleep.
During one high-speed rehearsal, a stuntman was thrown from his chariot and landed directly in the path of the oncoming horses. Crew members described seeing dust explode around his body as the animals thundered toward him. At the last second, the horses split instinctively around his fallen figure, missing his head by inches. The chariot wheel slammed into the ground exactly where he had rolled moments earlier. People watching screamed for the riders to stop, but the arena was too loud for them to hear. The stuntman crawled away in shock, barely believing he was still alive. Wyler halted rehearsals and demanded stricter safety measures immediately. Stunt coordinators redesigned the crash zones to prevent another near-fatal disaster. Even experienced riders admitted the chariot arena was more unpredictable than anything they had faced before. The incident spread quietly among the crew but never reached the press. Some performers considered quitting after witnessing how close death had come. The event changed how the team rehearsed high-speed shots, and the terrifying close call still stands as one of the most dangerous moments ever captured on a Hollywood set. Fact 4. The waterfall escape sequence forced actors to plunge repeatedly into freezing water that left them gasping for air. Crew members added steam effects to make the scene appear warm and tropical on camera. Extras trembled between takes, wrapping themselves in blankets that offered little relief. The cold caused some performers to lose feeling in their hands and feet. Medical staff monitored them constantly because hypothermia was a real risk. Heston insisted on performing the plunges himself to keep the sequence believable. Debris in the water made footing dangerous, and several extras slipped on hidden rocks. Wyler demanded multiple angles, which meant the actors endured the cold far longer than expected. The basin collected mud, leaves, and fragments of the set, making every step unpredictable. Some performers said they could barely speak after long takes because their jaws were chattering. The freezing water produced real reactions of panic and exhaustion that Wyler kept in the final cut. The crew tried warming the water, but doing so interfered with the steam effects. The misery lasted days, turning the sequence into one of the production's harshest experiences. And the final footage captured the desperation so perfectly that audiences still feel the shock today. Fact 5. Ben-Hur grew so expensive that MGM executives quietly adjusted budget reports to avoid alarming shareholders. Internal documents later revealed multiple attempts to disguise overspending by shifting costs between departments. As delays piled up, the budget ballooned far beyond the studio's expectations. Executives worried that if the film failed, MGM would collapse financially. They froze wages in several departments to slow the bleeding. Some crew members were asked to reuse materials instead of building new pieces. Confidential memos described the film as a financial sinkhole that could not be allowed to fail. Producers presented optimistic figures publicly while privately begging for more funding. The studio board considered shutting the whole production down at several points. Wyler refused to scale back the film's size, insisting the spectacle was necessary. Costs continued to rise as more extras, animals, and set pieces were added. Executives knew revealing the true budget would terrify investors. When the film finally released, its success saved the studio from bankruptcy. And only years later did the public learn just how close MGM came to financial ruin. Fact 6. For the massive sea battle sequence, the crew built incredibly detailed miniature ships placed inside a huge outdoor water tank. These models were packed with pyrotechnics that were far more volatile than the effects team anticipated. When ignited, some explosions erupted with so much force that pieces of the ships melted instantly. Operators hiding behind shields were showered with debris as wooden fragments flew into the air. Smoke poured across the water so thickly that visibility dropped to almost nothing. Several explosions burned through the models before cameras were ready, forcing the team to rebuild ships overnight. The heat from repeated blasts warped the tank rails, making it difficult to position new models. Water cannons malfunctioned during early tests, causing unintended splashes that ruined multiple takes. Every detonation carried the risk of igniting surrounding equipment. Crew members used fire hoses between takes to cool the tank walls. Wyler pushed for bigger explosions, despite safety concerns, because he wanted unmatched realism. Many shots had to be captured in a single attempt due to the destructive nature of the effects. And the final sequence remains one of cinema's most impressive miniature battles ever filmed. Fact 7. To avoid hiring thousands of additional extras, the production placed mannequins in the upper levels of the chariot arena. These figures wore Roman robes, but their stiff poses made them look unsettlingly lifeless up close. Wind gusts frequently knocked them over, sending plastic limbs clattering across the stands. Assistants spent hours propping them back up while joking that the dummies looked more bored than real crowds. Lighting crews had to carefully avoid shining too brightly on them to prevent the audience from noticing their empty eyes. In wide shots, the mannequins blended convincingly with the live extras below. Crew members often bumped into them backstage, mistaking them for real people. Some actors said walking past rows of silent plastic spectators felt eerie. Wyler insisted the mannequins were essential for the illusion of a stadium packed with 50,000 people. Storage areas overflowed with spare heads, arms, and legs ready for repairs. Wardrobe teams made tiny adjustments so their robes wouldn't flap unnaturally. During filming, a few mannequins collapsed mid-take, causing unintended comedy on set. And despite how crude the trick sounds today, most viewers never realized they weren't real. Fact 8.
The gods favor my Lord Gratus. If it is the governor's pleasure, the wreath of office.
The filming of Ben-Hur occurred long before modern stunt regulations were enforced, leaving performers to work in extremely hazardous conditions. Riders leapt between moving chariots without harnesses or wires to protect them. Falls onto the sand were real impacts that bruised ribs and scraped skin. The blistering desert heat caused dehydration so severe that medical staff set up triage stations. Some extras fainted mid-scene and were quietly carried off set. Stunt coordinators improvised safety measures using ropes, pads, and blankets whenever possible. Many performers completed takes while visibly exhausted. The rough terrain made every gallop risky as horses stumbled over hidden dips. Despite the danger, Wyler demanded authenticity and refused to tone down the action. Injuries were common but often reported only at the end of each day. Stuntmen described the production as one of the toughest of their careers. Their work gave the film its raw, visceral energy, and the lack of modern protections made every completed stunt feel like a narrow escape. Fact 9. During one intense practice run, a chariot wheel suddenly detached and shot across the arena like a spinning missile. The runaway wheel bounced violently toward the camera crew positioned near the track. Operators dove aside just in time as the wheel smashed into equipment, sending tripods and cables flying. The horses pulling the chariot panicked and veered off course, dragging the vehicle dangerously close to the arena wall. Wranglers rushed in to calm the animals as dust filled the air. Engineers halted the rehearsal and immediately checked every wheel on set. They discovered stress fractures caused by repeated high-speed runs. Reinforced metal hubs were installed to prevent another catastrophe. Crew members remained shaken long after the near miss. Wyler insisted the incident be kept quiet to avoid alarming the studio. The scare highlighted the unpredictable nature of the race, and the event became one of the crew's most retold survival stories. Fact 10. Heston spent long days in the scorching arena, shouting commands during the chariot sequences. The heat dried out his throat, causing painful strain on his vocal cords. Doctors advised him to rest his voice, but the schedule left little room for recovery. Wyler adjusted shooting plans to reduce close-up dialogue until Heston healed. Warm water on set offered little relief, making each shout more difficult than the last. Heston often rehearsed silently to conserve strength. Crew members noticed his voice growing hoarser with each passing week. The physicality of the role forced him to push harder than expected. His gritty vocal tone ultimately added realism to the scenes. Whispered conversations between takes became his only form of communication. The strain aged his voice noticeably by the end of production. Yet he never complained because he believed in the film's vision, and the rawness of his performance remains one of Ben-Hur's most memorable qualities. Fact 11. To create the brutal sandstorm, the crew brought in full-size airplane turbines capable of blasting sand at extreme speeds. The engines produced winds strong enough to push extras off balance. Sand and debris struck the actor's skin with painful force, leaving red marks after each take. Heston shielded his eyes instinctively, even though goggles weren't allowed for historical accuracy. The roaring noise made it impossible for crew members to communicate. Assistants used hand signals to warn actors before each blast. The engines kicked up leftover dust from previous scenes, creating clouds that lingered for hours. Some extras collapsed from the intensity and needed medical attention. Wyler insisted the raw chaos made the scene more believable. Sand clogged cameras and required constant cleaning between takes. Lighting crews struggled to keep lamps steady as the engines shook the ground. Footage from the storm sequence shows genuine struggle, not acting. The conditions drained the cast physically and emotionally, and the sandstorm remains one of the most punishing scenes ever filmed for a Hollywood epic. Fact 12. Ben-Hur's Jerusalem set stretched across acres of studio space, creating a maze-like network of alleys, markets, and walls. New crew members frequently wandered into the wrong scenes because the layout was so confusing. Wyler eventually requested directional signs just so people could find their departments. Extras reported getting lost for 10 minutes or more between takes. Lighting teams used walkie-talkies constantly to coordinate positions. Some parts of the set looked so real that visitors forgot they were walking through a movie production. The scale forced production assistants to escort actors to their marks. Horse wranglers struggled to maneuver animals through narrow corridors. The massive structure required hundreds of workers each morning just to prepare it. Even Heston admitted he got turned around several times. Crew members compared the set to a self-contained city with its own traffic. Construction crews had to reinforce several passageways to support the constant movement, and the overwhelming scale contributed significantly to the film's legendary realism. Fact 13. Italy temporarily loaned low-risk inmates to MGM to serve as background extras during large crowd shots. Guards remained on set but stayed out of sight so the prisoners didn't look supervised. The inmates wore Roman clothing rather than prison uniforms, blending seamlessly into the crowds. They were given simple actions such as cheering, walking, or carrying props. Most behaved respectfully because the work offered a rare break from confinement. Crew members were told not to ask questions about who they were. Some extras avoided interacting with them out of discomfort. Wyler believed their unpredictable energy added authenticity to the crowds. The inmates were returned to prison quietly after each day's work. Their involvement saved the studio significant money. No incidents were ever reported despite the risk. The public never learned about their presence during production, and their participation remains one of the strangest secrets behind the film. Fact 14. The film's battle and execution scenes required staggering amounts of fake blood mixed fresh every morning. Makeup teams filled buckets with thick red dye that clung stubbornly to skin and fabric. Extras often spent hours soaked in the sticky mixture before cameras rolled. The heat caused the blood to dry quickly, making costumes stiff and uncomfortable. Wardrobe crews struggled to clean garments between takes. Some costumes were permanently stained and had to be replaced entirely. Wyler demanded increasingly intense levels of realism as filming progressed. The blood sometimes pooled on the ground, creating slippery hazards for the actors. Extras playing wounded soldiers had to lie still in the heat while covered in layers of dye. The smell of the mixture worsened over long shooting days. Fake blood splattered onto equipment, requiring constant cleaning. Some scenes had to be toned down in editing to avoid shocking audiences. The sheer amount used remains unmatched in historical epics, and the commitment to intense carnage contributed to the film's emotional impact. Fact 15. Director William Wyler was notorious for his obsessive shooting style, demanding countless takes of even simple scenes. By the end of production, the crew estimated that over 1 million feet of film had been used. Editors worked around the clock just to keep up with new footage arriving daily. Storage rooms filled with reels stacked floor to ceiling. MGM executives begged Wyler to limit his shooting, but he ignored their concerns. Many scenes were shot from multiple angles to allow for perfect pacing. Actors admitted they sometimes forgot which version of a scene they were performing. Wyler's perfectionism slowed the schedule and strained relationships with the crew. Some takes lasted far longer than the actors expected, pushing them to exhaustion. Editors later said the footage was both overwhelming and invaluable. The abundance allowed Wyler to refine performances down to single gestures. MGM feared the editing process alone could take years, but the final cut showcased the precision he demanded, and the mountain of film remains one of the largest ever shot for a single production. Fact 16. The intense heat on the arena set pushed the horses to their physical limit during long shooting days. Wranglers monitored every animal closely for signs of exhaustion or dehydration. To keep them safe, horses were rotated in and out of scenes every few hours. Shade tents were set up around the perimeter of the arena to give the animals relief between takes. Many horses struggled with the deep sand, which made running more difficult than expected. Trainers constantly adjusted the chariot's harnesses to prevent injury. Water barrels were placed at strategic points so the horses could drink as soon as cameras stopped. Some days, the animals refused to run until handlers calmed them down. The welfare team intervened whenever temperatures spiked dangerously high. Wyler insisted the horses' health came before production speed. Despite precautions, several animals needed treatment for overheating. Their heavy breathing was often kept in the final cut because it looked dramatic. The chariot race depended entirely on their endurance, and the constant rotation helped ensure the film could continue without risking the horses' well-being. Fact 17. The heavy Roman costumes worn by extras trapped heat so effectively that many began fainting during long shooting sessions. Medical staff treated dehydration cases almost every day. The sun reflecting off the arena sand intensified the heat to unbearable levels. Extras waited hours in direct sunlight while scenes were rehearsed. Water stations often ran empty faster than the crew anticipated. Some performers collapsed mid-shot and had to be carried away quietly. The heat waves rising off the track distorted camera lenses during wide shots. Wardrobe teams struggled to keep costumes intact as sweat soaked the fabric. Wyler pushed through the conditions because rescheduling was nearly impossible. Crews set up makeshift shade structures, but they barely helped. Extras described the shoot as physically punishing beyond anything they'd experienced. Many refused to return after particularly brutal days. Their exhaustion is visible in the crowd scenes if you look closely, and surviving the heat became a badge of honor among the background performers. Fact 18. During an outdoor scene, a sudden earthquake shook the Roman soundstage, sending props and dust falling from above. The tremor surprised the cast because it hit during an otherwise normal rehearsal. Set walls swayed noticeably as actors scrambled to stable ground. Wyler immediately ordered everyone to evacuate until structural engineers could assess the damage. Several plaster pieces cracked along the arena's upper levels. Crew members worked overnight reinforcing weakened areas with additional supports. Horses panicked during the quake and had to be calmed by wranglers. Equipment toppled over, damaging several camera stands. The delay cost the studio thousands of dollars and pushed the schedule further behind. Wyler used the time to review footage and adjust upcoming scenes. The incident left workers uneasy for days afterward. Weather on the Roman backlots became an unexpected production hazard, and the earthquake quietly became one of the many real-life disasters the film had to overcome. Fact 19. Heston insisted on performing several of his own falls during action scenes, surprising even the veteran stuntmen. He spent hours rehearsing how to drop from a moving chariot safely. The sand cushioned impacts slightly, but the speed still made each fall risky. Crew members worried he might injure himself and halt production. Heston believed audiences could detect when doubles were used. His determination pushed stunt coordinators to adapt their plans. Several takes left bruises along his arms and back. Wyler appreciated the authenticity Heston brought to the scenes. His confidence grew with each successful fall. Other actors admired his willingness to take risks. Close-up shots benefited from his involvement directly in the action. His injuries were minor, but they showed his dedication. And Heston's physical commitment helped elevate the chariot race into one of cinema's greatest action sequences. Fact 20. The massive arena produced clouds of dust that hung in the air during every take. Actors breathed it in constantly as chariots thundered across the track. Crew members wore masks between shots, but cast members couldn't for continuity. Several performers developed persistent coughing fits during long days. Medical staff distributed lozenges and nasal treatments on set. The dust-coated equipment and required constant cleaning. Wyler refused to reduce the quantity of sand because it contributed to the gritty realism. Some extras described tasting dust for days after filming. Cameras frequently needed to be wiped down mid-scene. The dust also irritated horses, making them more difficult to control. Editors later noticed fine particles floating across footage. Despite attempts to minimize the issue, the air quality remained poor throughout shooting, and the dust problem became one of the production's most exhausting and overlooked challenges.